Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Today we're going to talk about ASEs. Well, we're going to talk about ASEs and we're going to talk about something new that some of you may not know about. And so it's really pertinent in these times of the COVID and things closing down. So in this industry, I'm in the auto light truck, so we have A1 through A9, and then there's L1, L2, and X1. Well, there is an app that, so every 5 years, we got to recert these ASEs. We go into a testing center and we take about, I don't know, what is it, 5/8 of the, of the original test, maybe 2/3 of the test that we normally took to get recertified, and you have another 5 years on your ASE. Well, so now, and right now that's a really rough thing in these times because of COVID, right? So the testing centers are closing down. They're making it much more difficult. I'm sure if they are open, the spots are far and few between. So maybe before, maybe the place will have 40 people at one time. Now maybe they have 20, or maybe they only have 12, right? So then you're going to have less opportunity to schedule your tests to go take them. So there is an app, and you can go on aserenewalapp.com. Okay, so when you go to that app, you're going to sign up. It's going to validate your ASE account, validate your ASEs, all right? And so what this is going to do is this is going to give you the ability to download an app. And this app will allow you to recertify every year A1 through A9. All right, this app costs $48 for 1 year. So in 12 months, you have to get 8 questions correct to get a recertification. And when you do that, you get 1 year added onto your ASE. So every month you'll get a question. It'll be a A, B, C, or D question. And if you get it wrong, then a week later you get a second chance try. So essentially you get 24 chances to pass 8 questions. As long as you pass 8 in the year, then you get 1 year added on to that ASE. So, if you only had one ASE, like let's say you had brakes, right? Maybe, is it good enough? Is it worth it if you only have one ASE? Well, I mean, one of the really good things is that you don't have to go into a testing center to take your test. You don't have one try to pass. You don't have to, whether you pay for it, whether your employer pays for it, it doesn't matter. You have the ability to do it all on your phone, and you have a while to take it. I believe you have until the next month. I've never waited, but you have until the next month to take it. Maybe you could even stack them up. I'm not sure. I actually don't know the answer to that, but I know that it costs $48 a year, and they just added A9 last year. I was super bummed. I had 5. It didn't add it until I was most of the way through the year, and I had 5 questions correct when my year ended. And so those 5 questions didn't count towards anything for my A9. So that was kind of a bummer. But for my first year, I paid $48, and I recerted A1 through A8 and for 1 year. So I didn't have to go take those. So essentially, if you get this app and you download it every year, you will not have to go to a testing center to take A1 through A9 ever again, as long as you pass the test. Now, if you're like me and you have other ASEs, then you still have to go into the testing center. You just don't have to worry about the A1 through A9. So, like I have L1, L2, and X1. So those, I will always have to go into a testing center for those. I don't know if they'll ever add X1. I know they won't ever add L1 and L2. I highly doubt that. And the questions sometimes are pretty tough. I mean, sometimes they're really tough. One thing I noticed though about the questions, if you get it wrong and you get your second chance question, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. Every time that I've gotten one wrong, my second chance question, it had something to do with the one that I got wrong. So like one time I got one wrong, it was about PCV on a turbo vehicle, I believe. was a turbo or a supercharged vehicle. I can't remember. But anyways, so the first question had something to do with PCV on a turbo vehicle, and my second chance question was the same thing. It was a PCV on a turbo vehicle. It just had a different. They just spun it different. It was a different kind of question. So that's it there. It's aserenewalapp.com. And I'll put a link in the description to the website. And I think it's phenomenal. I think it's fantastic. I love this opportunity. You do it on your phone. It is really, really pertinent right now with the COVID, with things closing down. You know, it's kind of a bummer because I have multiple licenses in California, and I have like 2 of them right now that I have to go take. And it's kind of tough because testing centers closing down and limiting the amount of people they have. So anyway, so that's super important to have that. And like I said, check it out, man. $48 for a year, you can't beat that. And you know, 24 tries to get 8 right. So, all right. So another thing is when you're taking these ASEs, another really important thing is to remember that a lot of times the ASEs, a little tip for you if you're taking ASEs. So a lot of times there's usually one question that's completely asinine and does not apply at all. There's another one that probably doesn't apply. Sometimes they link 3 in there that are all pretty close, but most of the time there's 2 that are pretty close to right. And you got to just go with. So what I learned about ASEs and what works for me is that you want to figure out what the most probable answer is. What is the most likely? And so when you do that, what you want to do is you want to try to rule them out. So if you're doing it on the app, okay, it's a little bit trickier because you're on your phone, but you know, you can just for getting confused purposes, you can have a little notepad and just scratch off, you know, whatever, if you're new to ASEs and you're still learning. So you want to you'll see one, just be like completely like, nope, that's not it. If you got, you know, some sort of an electrical question and it's saying something about, you know, power and there is power, well then obviously the one that applies to the fuse is not going to be right because that fuse would be blown or whatever, so you can just scratch that off. So that way you're not sitting there in the end trying to figure out if it's A, B, C, or D. You know it's not D, and it's most likely not B, so is it A or is it C? So that's what I learned about that. Now the other thing that I've learned about ASEs, and I learned this when I was in school, we did it in school too, and we actually did some experiments with this. Go with your gut. Your gut feeling is usually the right one. Now this more applies to if you're taking a test with, like let's say you're going to an ASE test center. This applies to that more. You usually when you answer a question, unless you just absolutely do not know anything about what you're taking the test on and you're just throwing darts, okay, well that doesn't even count. What we're talking about is you're taking a test that you're, you know, somewhat familiar with, maybe not an expert, whatever, or maybe you're still learning. It doesn't matter. So you're gonna have an answer based on what you think right off the bat. Usually you want to go with that answer. In school we did stuff where we would take tests and you would look back through and then they would say the ones that you got wrong, look and see if you initially had it right. You wouldn't believe how many times people had the right answer and they erased it, and then they added the correct, and they changed the answer, and the one that they scratched was the right answer. So that is a really important thing. Now the only time that doesn't apply is, and I've had times where I'm going through a test and I'm thinking one way, and you answer all the questions, and then you get to the end, and then for some reason you go, oh my God, I was thinking about that completely backwards. You know, like something stupid like, oh, negative fuel trim is, you know, taking away fuel, but maybe you were thinking the opposite. You know, you were thinking it was adding fuel. And so you answered all the questions where every time it was talking about negative fuel trims, you were adding fuel, you were taking away fuel. but you were adding fuel. And then at the end, oh my God, wait a minute, I had that completely backwards. Then you go back and you find the fuel trim questions and you reread them, remembering that negative fuel trim is taking away fuel, not adding. So then you can change your answers at that point. Usually you don't want to change your answers. You want to stick with your gut, stick with what you got, stay there, stay with it. And that will usually help. And a lot of times, even with this app, man, there's been some of these, because I've been doing this app for, I think, 1.5 years. I restarted all my A1 through A8 last year, and then this year I'm like, I think I'm on question 5, I think I've got 5 right so far, so I need 3 more. But anyways, there's been times that I answer a question, and then the correct answer was exactly my gut. I just changed it. So you'll see that, what happened to you. And so remember that. Stick with your gut. Your gut feeling is usually the correct one, unless you absolutely have no clue. The other thing is, now this is, man, if you aren't completely sure, try to rule out what it probably can't be. It is easier to decide between 2 answers than it is 4. So if you can rule out 1 or 2 questions, 1 or 2 answers, it's a lot easier to do that, especially wiring diagrams. Man, find the ones that just don't make sense. Scratch them off so you don't even look at them. That's my advice. That's my tip. I've been ASE certified for a long time. Take those. Now, one of the things I want to mention is I said I have X1. You cannot take X1 unless you have already passed brakes and suspension. So once you've passed brakes and suspension, you can take X1. No, hang on. Yeah, brakes and suspension, because what X1 does is it gives you an undercar specialist certificate. So there's really no difference, except for I have a whole nother certificate that says undercar specialist, because I have brakes, suspension, and X1, which is exhaust. It's kind of like L1. You cannot take L1 until you've passed A8, which is engine performance. And so, and then now let's talk about that. Let's talk about L1. This is my little, I'm gonna give you little tech tips about ASEs. All right, so for a long time, actually almost the entire time that I've been taking ASEs, the L1 test has used a certain composite vehicle, and they used it for a really long time. So the composite vehicle, if you've never taken one of these, it is a book, and that book has a vehicle in it, and they've built a vehicle. They've built the vehicle, they have the engine, whether, you know, what kind of cam system it has, what if it chain, timing belt, I believe it was a chain, and all the things that had all the electrical connectors, all the wiring diagrams, exactly how the evap system, what kind of evap system it was, how it worked, the transmission, the security, everything. So the L1 would be, half the questions would be advanced engine performance, and the other half would be based on this composite vehicle. They would give you a symptom, a scenario on that vehicle, and you would have to go back through. You would have to find the APP sensor, and you would have to look and see if the voltage was here on this, and you had this, and you'd have to go back to the wiring diagram, and back to the connector, back to the wiring, and back to the description and operation of the sensor. And so that's how the L test works. But recently, a few years ago, they changed it. They changed the L1 to a different composite vehicle, a more complex vehicle. Now this complex vehicle, if I remember correctly, it was a dual overhead cam V6. I can't remember if it was a V6 or a 4-cylinder. But one thing I do remember was it has variable cam timing on both cams. So the intake and the exhaust can be varied, which makes it more difficult to diagnose. And everything about the vehicle was updated. So obviously, if you take a test 15 years later, you're going to update everything the way that the industry is. The vehicle is going to update itself as that also. So as before, most guys, they would take the L1 and not ever miss it. Didn't phase them. They would pass it every time. I actually saw most people fail the L1 the first time on their recert because they weren't used to this new vehicle. Because the new vehicle, it makes your brain hurt because it's a lot harder to diagnose because it's a vehicle of today. So you're diagnosing a vehicle of today, and that's really important. So that's a little tech tip there for the L series tests. And then L2 is just, It's just basically it's the same thing as gasoline, except for it's for diesel. You don't have to have any other test to take L2. So I'm a gas and diesel tech, so I have L1 and L2. And if you don't have ASEs, man, they're good to get. ASEs are good anywhere in the United States. You can move to Hawaii, you can move to Rhode Island, Maine, Texas, Utah. It doesn't matter. ASEs are the same everywhere. And it doesn't mean that you know everything about the vehicle or everything about that system. It means that you've passed the test, you got the certifications. I've known a lot of guys that have all kinds of ASEs and they can't diagnose anything. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it means a lot to shops and employers. And in some places they pay, $0.25 an hour per ASE more, or, just depends. In some places require it for certain jobs. So if you don't have an ASE, go get one. Go get at least one ASE and just keep it. Take more. So anyways, that's my little tech tip about ASEs. And good luck on that. If you take the L1, good luck. Let me know in the comments how that works for you. If you pass, if you fail, if you thought it was easy, if you thought it was hard. This has been great informing you of this. And if you didn't know about this, man, go check it out. Click the link. Go log in. Leave me a comment down below if this applies to you. If you like it, if you don't like it, whatever. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. If you hit the bell, you get notified of all my future content. And thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time.